This is a Naga Siren, they're Circe of the Siren Isles, and this thing is singing the song that has drawn us all here. The Siren Isle is quite the place. It is packed with mountains of lore all in one dense area. Its name alone actually tells 3 whole stories. Mysteries are abound, and these range from the fate of the Kulturans to the identity of the rebellious Ancient Vrykul. Their story actually cuts quite deep into the lore. And then, when you plunge into those depths, you find lore pointing to the return of Queen Azshara, a story about our World Soul, one that will help define the World Soul saga, and a boatload of new lore that is pointing toward what's on the other side of Azeroth. You know that there's a storm in this patch, and the thing that is blocking us from getting to the other side of Azeroth is, of course, a storm. The Siren Isle has been known to generations of sailors, a ruin of storms and monsters from where nobody returns. But of course, we're going there for the exact reason why it's dangerous, this powerful crystal that has recently began singing. The Arathi heard it, even the goblins heard it, but funny enough, the Earthen did not hear it. Whenever we turn up, we find the wreckage of a Kulturan expedition, and a diary tells us of a sole survivor who lived for months in isolation, battling storms and eating crowlusks. But of course, after some time, something happened. He began to hear a song that was sorrowful but bright, and it was coming from underneath the isle. By now, at the edge of his sanity, he set out to find the crystal. He dug until his fingers bled, until one day he eventually found a door. The diary ends in an indecipherable scrawl of text and a dark red stain, and that means that something or someone on the island was protecting its secrets. But of course, we have now been drawn there by that very same song. 3 expeditions, in fact. The goblins are there for opportunity, the Earthen are there to try and figure out their past, and the Arathi are there to try and figure out their future. All are a long way from home, which brings up the question, where is the Siren Isle? Click into the Isle of Dorn, and somewhere far to the west is the Siren Isle. It actually doesn't have a specific location, and that's almost a hint in itself. Earthen mentioned that they'd never been so far from Khazalgar that they could not see their home island on the horizon. Now that still could be relatively close, the horizon isn't that far away, but the Goblin expedition was captained by Kraz, a veteran of the Second War and an expert in long-haul Zeppelin flying, so we're talking about somewhere decently far away to the west. Now, if you scan as far west as you can possibly go, you'll see another region, one that is famous for massive monsters and massive storms. It's called the Storming Sea, and we in fact know that the Arathi that we met in Hallowfall hailed from the other side of the Storming Sea. The Siren Isle has got tons of lore that points toward the other side of Azeroth, but for just now, let's stick to the war within for a second. That's because to understand all this, we gotta see what's going on with the Earthen. On the isle, an Earthen named Bargus tells us that their expedition's technology cannot interact with this new form of crystal, which is quite weird to him, but of course, if you've been keeping up with the Brinth and Dagran storyline where they've been searching through the Earthen archive, it does actually make quite a bit of sense. Let me explain that for you. So this is Arcadis. He kept records of his work in Azeroth as basically the architect of the Titans' many different installations, but it didn't all go to plan. They built a massive complex around the World Soul, but Azeroth did not seem to like this being built. It was called the World Core. Azeroth began to sing to the Earthen who were building the World Core, which she must have thought was somewhat of her prison. Now, those Earthen then transformed into Thragar, crystalline Earthen, ones that very much look like Magni Bronzebeard. And also like Magni, these Earthen were sworn to Azeroth herself, and that does sound very similar to the Titan Forge that we see on the Siren Isle. More on those soon. Now, Arcadis' solution to the Thragar problem was to wipe their memories and recycle them into new Earthen. That's actually one of the reasons why Earthen have got memory gems on Khazalgar. But still, the plan did not exactly work, because the Earthen of Khazalgar slowly started to act a little bit more like mortals with free will. Another revelation, then, from these archives is these crystals. According to the archive, they're solidified chunks of Azeroth's energy. They come from the World Soul itself. So with this isle, it seems that we found another massive crystal, but for these Earthen, they can't interact with it. But luckily for them, we have got resident massive crystal experts on hand. So let's jump over to the Arathi story. The Arathi expedition is joined by their order of Sacredites. Now, these are Arathi so devout that they have not left the Priory of the Sacred Flame since it was built. They name this crystal Lordinal, the Song of the Sea, and they demand that we treat the crystal with reverence. Now, these Sacredites have got these little light shards that they brought with them from Hallowfall. They call these Radiant Remnants. We've of course seen them as players, and they appear to be small shards of Beledar that have fallen over time. Now, combining these with Earthen technology, we basically get a reading on this crystal, and we find out that the crystal of the Isle is indeed like Beledar, and it runs miles deep into the earth. And what's more, there's actually a second signal. So with that set up, let's now explore the Sacred Hollow and the true history of the Siren Isle. Bargus burst into the Sacred Hollow, where we found a resonating crystal that transported us somewhere deep underground. When we're there, we find what looked to be Titan ruins and a whole bunch of Iron Vrykul statues. Memories of these Vrykul even haunt the halls, and they're known as the Crystal Sworn. Which again, thinking about the Thragar, certainly gets your brain going. Now, the mystery goes deeper and deeper as we find they have carved their story onto these tablets, and they begin by telling us that long ago, these Vrykul left the warring north to escape the bloodshed of the Winterscorn. They then traveled from the Stormpike, which we know as the Storm Peaks, because their keeper actually went silent. And this is fascinating stuff. This tells us exactly who these Vrykul are and just about when they left. Around 20,000 years ago, Loken, the prime designate of the Keepers, finally fell to the corrupting whispers of Yogg-Saron. The old gods had essentially convinced Loken that if the Titans were to return and to find out all the evil Loken had done, because by that stage, it's another story, but he had done some bad things, that they would destroy him. So Loken basically went on a campaign of silencing the other Keepers. The story is essentially that Yogg-Saron had dirt on Loken and said, hey, if this gets out when your boss comes back, you are going to be in deep trouble. So what was this great sin that gave Yogg-Saron leverage? Here's that story. The Prime Designate was having an affair with another Keeper, Thorum's wife, Sif. And in a void-induced rage, Loken killed Sif and blamed the king of the Frost Giants, and that sent Thorum and his Vrykul to war with the Frost Giants, giants that of course we met in Wrath of the Lich King. And after this war, Thorum then retreated to the Temple of Storms with no contact with the outside world until we meet him in Wrath of the Lich King. And that meant that he left his loyal tribes of Vrykul vulnerable to Loken's chosen Winterscorn. This Winterscorn war was absolutely savage. Loken basically drove them on a campaign of extermination. They scattered the earthen around the world. They led to Arcadis' stasis in Uldaman, where we found him during Classic, and of course Tyr's death at the hands of the Carthaxi, which we actually played through in a vision in the Dragonflight expansion. This was a whole world of chaos where things were crumbling down, and in that context, Cersei, leader of the Stormwind Vrykul, led her people away from the north. And these tablets tell us of their years of exodus and finally hearing the call of the Humusul, as they call it, which translates to Luminous Heart, and of course is the giant crystal that we find buried on the Siren Isle. They settled on this island long before it had storms, perhaps even before it was an island, because they settled here before the Sundering happened. And what they built was mighty. We see it, a great tower above the surface and Titan-forged halls deep below. Around this time, Cersei's advisor, Yardfir, learnt of these shards, and he basically took them and he carved them into intricate designs. Eventually, he carved a few of these and set them in a circlet, which was given to Cersei. And like with the Sacredites crystals, these citrines, again, if you remember back to our peculiar fish video, they're a little weird. We actually find in that video that the Kobus, who are the weird fish people that keep on attacking the Arathi, they also have got these strange crystals. In their case, they are sunless shards, and they are carved crystals. When carved, they became more powerful. So both in the Peculiar Fish questline and with the Kobus, and here in the Siren Isle, we are seeing what appear to be shards of Beledar, or a Beledar-like crystal, doing extremely powerful deeds. One of our next patches is called Nightfall, which absolutely makes me think that Blizzard are going to be cooking with this in the future. But here's the thing, these crystals are actually more powerful than you'd think. Cersei's companion, Thayer, a storm raven, much like, say, the storm rooks used by the Earthen, was once blessed by Thorum, the Titan Keeper I mentioned earlier. But over time, its eyes were replaced with these citrines, and it actually became a conduit for the crystal. And that is where our story really kicks into high gear. 10,000 years ago, the world shattered and darkness rose. This was the War of the Ancients, the end of it. Azshara sundering where the Well of Eternity exploded, shattering the supercontinent of Kalimdor, and for Cersei's Vrykul, well, the area they'd settled buckled and fell into the ocean. The War of the Ancients' conclusion meant the Legion were gone for now. That meant it was time for the old gods to take a crack at the world, and with this, the Lord of the Deep, likely N'Zoth, sent an emissary. Everything flows with beautiful poetry, and this is what we're told. The Deep One stirs, this place calls out. His right to claim is nigh. Kneel before the Old One's gifts, their powers yours combined. Which was, of course, an offer too good to be true. Cersei turned with her blade and slew the emissary of the Void. And when she did, thousands of scaled creatures stormed the island. The Vrykul were pushed back and back deeper into their halls. But that is when a hyper-mysterious detail of this story stands out, one that has got proper lore implications. I'm going to read a passage from one of the tablets recounting this story. On golden wings from high above, her plea was heard. A heaven's gift they brought. Somebody came to their rescue in one of those final battles. We're not exactly sure just yet, but they were not able to turn the tide. And as more of the crystal-sworn Vrykul fell, Thayer's rage grew. He rose into the sky and shrieked, a conduit of elemental storms empowered by the citrines of the crystal. And with that scream, a massive storm blew in, smashed the invaders, and ensured that nobody would be able to return to the island without a massive chance of death. And it's been like that for 10,000 years since. And this is fascinating from a lore perspective for so many different reasons, but basically, this storm, the idea is it's an impenetrable storm that has been cast up through the power of a crystal that has just been confirmed to be extremely similar to Beledar. We actually have a passage of a Titan Keeper from Dragonflight mentioning the Storming Sea. We know that the Storming Sea is where the Arathi came from. You can see that all of this is tying together, and it's tying together in a way that brings in Azeroth. But of course, some people did try to return to this island. Educated Tide Sages in Borealis knew of the isle as some great mystery of the sea, and that meant that legends passed. Stories passed down to the fleshy Vrykul, and many different clans attempted to claim the honor of destroying the last of Cersei's Vrykul and claim the isle. Pirates, of course, believed it was laden with treasure, but the most mysterious motivation of all has to be that of the Naga, especially because they're there on the Siren Isle right when we are, and all as a part of some grand scheme to bring Queen Azshara back. We finally reach the inner sanctum of the crystal, and we find a very dead pirate with Cersei's circlet in his hand. It's ours now, and over the following weeks we're going to power it up. And our reward is actually massive. For most players, they'll think, great, I leveled up my ring and now I can fly on my flying mount. But there are lore implications to this, because Cersei's circlet is a deeply lore-relevant item that is powered up with energy basically from Azeroth. Now remember, we are on the edge of the Storming Sea. The Arathi are looking for a way through the Storming Sea. It would be quite good if their expedition could report home, and we know that they can't because the last of their mages is dead. We also know the tales of the Night Squall. Remember the massive pirate fleet that has been assembling, looking for a way to the other side of the world. We also know the Naga are looking for a way through the wall, but somehow they already have forces on the other side. And with that, there are two things to wrap up our video. First, the Arathi Sky Captain Lancecat claims that she has fought Naga countless times in Imperial waters. Now, Imperial waters means the waters of their empire, which we know is on the other side of the Storming Sea. And that means there are enough Naga out there for the Arathi to have fought them countless times. Suffice to say, we are working up that video right now. The second major thing is this. This is the Perishel Scroll case, and inside it, we find a message. It's a message from the Dark Tide Naga who were fighting on the island, and this is what the message says. Nezeshi, Deep Surge, Hate Coil, all have sought her circlet, and all have failed, but we will succeed. We will atone for the failures endured upon these shores long ago and claim it, and with it, we will usher in our queen's return. That definitely set something up for the future. And we know Azshara is a character who Blizzard have been teasing the return of for quite some time. Of course, we last saw her in patch 8.3's raid to Ny'alotha, where she just decided, I am done dealing with heralds and intermediaries. She went through a void portal, presumably to talk to a void god or something extreme. Anyway, what is this circlet? Is it our way through the storm? At the very least, we know that whenever we get it and power it up, we can fly through the storm from a mechanical side. So it does seem to me that this circlet is in fact our way to chart through the storm. Now, Azshara is one of Warcraft's most powerful and knowledgeable characters. Why would she have sent some of her Naga to the other side? Suffice to say, there will be more on the video that we're working on that, but definitely I think about, well, Odin and the heretics of Avalorn that we found out about during the Dragonflight expansion. Maybe they're over there. Yeah, I can't wait to get into that video, but for now, if you want to know about the Titan conspiracy that has led to so many Titanforged rebelling against their makers and swearing themselves to Azeroth, check out this video on the World Core.